This next video focuses on 3 examples where we want to find the zeros of the function. Those zeros of the function, if you graph them out, are going to be the x-intercepts on the graph. So this first example, we want to find out what is the zeros of the function x squared minus x minus 6. And again, in this box is what I just said, that the x values are when the function equals 0. Those are also the x-intercepts of the graph. So step 1, we want to set the function equal to 0. So 0 equals x squared minus x minus 6. Now we have a quadratic equation and we want to find out what x can be. In a quadratic equation you can have up to 2 answers, 2 x values. So in this method you could use quadratic formula, you could use completing the square. Probably the most popular way is to solve by factoring. So I'm going to set this again equal to 0 and I want to factor this trinomial. The leading coefficient is 1. So that means we can use a chart method. If you remember the factoring by a chart, what are the factors of C that add to B? So we say negative 3 times positive 2 is negative 6. If I add those together, I get negative 1. So those are going to be my values in my parentheses, and I just split up the x's. If I fold that back out, I will get my original trinomial. So now I factored it. Step 3 is to set those factors equal to 0 and then solve for x. So I have one factor of x minus 3. I have another factor of x plus 2. This is also called the zero product property. And we solve those both for x. So in the first example in the green, I'm going to go ahead and add 3 to both sides. So one of the zeros is x equals 3. The red equation, I want to subtract 2 from both sides. So there's the second solution to this equation. Those are what we call the zeros of the function. Here's another example. Step 1 again is to set that function equal to 0. So 0 equals the square root of 2x minus 1. Now we solve this equation for x. What we have here is a radical, and what we can do is we can solve by undoing. So we're going to add 1 to both sides. So we get 1 on the left. On the right, square root of 2x. And then the minus 1 and plus 1 on the right will cancel out. The next thing to undo is that square root. To undo a square root, we square both sides. So I'm just going to rewrite the equation here again. And I'm going to square both sides. So now 1 times 1 on the left becomes 1 square root of 2x times square root of 2x. What happens there is they cancel out those radicals, and we're just left with 2x on the right and 1 on the left. Last step to solve for x is divide both sides by 2. So x equals 1/2 is the 0 of the function. Our third example is probably the most challenging one. When you have a function, and it's called a rational function, where you have a numerator and denominator, you want to set both the numerator equal to 0 and the denominator equal to 0. And you have to solve those separately. So I've done step 2. I've set the numerator equal to 0. So we have a quadratic equation. And then I've set the denominator equal to 0. So let's take care of the red one first. We want to solve that quadratic equation. Again, you can use completing the square, quadratic formula, or factor it. I always say factor it first. So this is another trinomial. The leading coefficient is 1, so we're going to use a chart. So if you can do this in your head, that is great. What are the factors of C, which is 14, that add to B, -9? Again, you don't have to do this writing it down. You can do it in your head. -7 times -2 is +14. When we add them together, we get -9. So these are the numbers we're going to work with. So we split up the x's, and then what I've just circled, the -7 and the -2, will go in those parentheses. Now I use the zero product property, and I set each factor equal to 0. So one of the factors is the first parentheses, x minus 7 equals 0. The second one is x minus 2 equals 0. Now we solve those by undoing. We add 7 to both sides. Add 2 to both sides. So there's 2 zeros so far. Now I'm going to go back over to that numerator. That denominator, 4x equals 0, and I want to solve that for x. So I'm going to undo the 4. I'm going to divide both sides by 4. 0 divided by 4 is 0. So there is my third zero of the function. These are called the zeros of the function.